so this past summer, I had an amazing opportunity to go down to Miami at Florida International University and work in their cybersecurity lab. And what I investigated was this idea of tracking or trying to track counterfeit devices on the smart grid. And to do this, we looked at the idea of like API call hooking, or as I'll tell you a little bit later on, not everything worked out. Somebody in my chemistry research had always said to me that 99% of the time the research won't work out as you expect it to, and it's even come true in my CS research. So I've come to expect that. So okay, so the first thing I'd like to address is kind of like what the existing electrical grid is, and then what the smart grid is. So the existing electrical grid is really just it involves a one-way interaction. It essentially sends from the power plant the electricity through the transmissions, the substations, and into your residential homes and businesses, and so it's this one-way interaction where it sends just electrical power. And so the current electrical grid was built in the 1890s. And though it's been improved upon for like every decade and such, it can't meet the rising demands that are necessary, especially with the rising number of devices that people use every day and how integrated they've become in homes and such. And so the existing electrical grid is very patchwork. It has different plants and substations around, but they're not all linked together. And so one of the ideas of the smart grid is to have this pretty universal grid that connects the substations together and such. So what is the smart grid? It allows a two-way communication, not only of electrical power, also this idea of like communication through a networking aspect, so that it can be more efficient, it can be more robust to different events of failure, it can be made more available, and it can add security in the case of when something goes down. You don't have massive blackouts where that would create issues of different national security, like critical infrastructures. So you exchange both electricity and information, and like I said, made more reliable, efficient, secure, and greener. And so the idea is, with this, since it's adding a more networking component to it and it's making it more integrated, there's going to be a lot more security risks that go along with it. So a big aspect of that is trying to figure out if a device is counterfeit or acting in a way that it normally wouldn't. And so to do this, we focused on this idea of tracking the API or the system call. So an API is the application programming interface. It's the set of routines or standards. It acts like the middleman between either an application and another application, or an application and the system. And in this case, we're looking at between applications and the system. And it allows for more portability and reliable execution. API call is more of like a top level, and then system call is really just a more lower level for the different requests that are made of the system. So in tracing these calls, you can kind of create a fingerprint for what devices are expected to do when they're using a certain application. And then by tracing those system calls, but this is an example from my graduate student advisor. He completed this on a Linux system, and so my request was to produce it on a Windows system, which, as it turns out, is a lot more complicated. And so the idea is that you trace the frequency of these calls, the actual identity of these calls, and you kind of create like a mapping of them, and then you're able to compare them from a device that's a real device to one that's counterfeit or compromised in one way or the other. And so it's unique for each process, and that kind of creates a fingerprint. And so to do this, you have to you hook into the call. And usually you do this between like the user program where it requests it and before it gets to the library function that calls to the kernel. And it creates the hook kind of usually just creates some way of tracing it, but sometimes can add a functionality to it. And it's usually during runtime that it dynamically does this hooking process, and it involves either usually redirection or injection of some sort of code. And the other thing is, as I'll get into because of this, the architecture of the operating system is really imperative to how this tracing can happen then. And so I guess when I first came in, I didn't really have a lot of background on operating systems, and I got to the point where I really realized why a lot of people say they love Linux instead of Windows, because the one thing with the difference between Linux and Windows a lot is that open source, and so Linux is extremely open source. You understand what the operating system is doing, and you can actually hook into the different like modes in the actual operating system. Whereas with Windows, a lot of it's pretty much closed source. You can't really see; it's like a black box, and that makes hooking into the system calls a lot more difficult. And with Linux, there's actually a way that there's just a command that you can type into a command line where you're like, I want to trace this. And they're like, cool, here you go. Whereas Windows, you're like, you can't really do that. You have to make your own method for it. And that is where we kind of ran into a brick wall. And so this is just a description of how the user mode and the kernel mode is a little bit different. And that the system call interface access go between those two. And the idea with this is like a general outlook, but it varies between operating systems, and with Windows it's a little bit more complicated. And the user mode and the kernel mode, it's more or less a way of protecting the kernel from you doing something dangerous on the kernel and having your system crash. So based on this idea of having such a difficulty trying to find a way to hook into the Windows system, we transitioned from doing this detection of the counterfeit devices to really broadening our outlook on the different techniques and tools you can use to hook into system calls, particularly on a Windows system, but expanded it outwards to include the Linux and also some of the Mac OS systems. And so this is the criteria for what became a survey of these tools. And a lot of it was based on the availability of the source code. With Windows, there are a lot of programs out there that are either just executables where you can run them, but there are also some where you actually have to compile the code yourself and work within those constraints. Some of them are sold for profit, some are for free. So for students like you and for most of us, then the free ones are pretty much the ones we really want. And then, like I said before, some of the functionalities of these tools are either strictly for monitoring these system calls to trace which ones happen, and I guess in that way how frequently. But some also can adjust that functionality and add a functionality to the call that's made to the kernel. Some other criteria includes like the most significant features, the ease of installation and use, and a general like classification to kind of give these each like a category to kind of fall under. That makes it a little easier to see. And so this is a sampling of the survey results, as you can see, based on operating system. The Linux ones are really easy. They're command line system call, like they're command line calls that you can make. And then the Windows are varied between something that you can download and you can run, or something that you can implement, like the IAT patching. You write your own code for that, and that involves a lot more knowledge of the actual operating system and just some of the lower level stuff. And then there's a little bit on the Mac OS. And as you can see on the right hand side, it's just a general classification of what kind of happens during those processes. And that is my journey from starting with one project and figuring out that it was is a little bit far over my head in one respect, and then transitioning to something that, like when I was searching, I couldn't find a general list of how do I do this. I found something in this corner of the web and that corner, and so to compile them together is something that was useful for me, but hopefully is useful for others who decide on using this in a similar or even just a very different capacity, but that is relevant to a new technique of either detection or just tracing. So I'd like to acknowledge my research advisor and my graduate student from the Florida International University in their Department of Electrical and Computer Engineering, and the National Science Foundation for the grant that afforded me the opportunity.